If I ask you what operating system runs the world, the answer seems obvious. You look at your laptop and you see Windows. You look at your creative studio and you see macOS. For 30 years, the OS wars have been a televised battle for the desktop sitting in front of you. But that war was a distraction. While we were arguing about start menus and rounded corners, another operating system quietly, methodically conquered everything else. It doesn't have a marketing budget. It doesn't have a CEO. You can't buy it in a box at Best Buy. Yet every time you use Google, scroll TikTok, check your bank balance, drive a modern car, or turn on a smart light bulb, you are using it. It's the operating system that runs 100% of the world's supercomputers. It powers the International Space Station. It is the backbone of the entire internet and the foundation of the global economy. Today, we're telling the impossible story of Linux, how a Finnish student's hobby project defeated the biggest corporations on Earth by giving everything away for free and became the invisible king of the modern world. To understand Linux, we have to go back before it existed. We have to go to the grandfather of modern computing, Unix. Created at Bell Labs in 1969, Unix was brilliant, powerful, and modular. But by the 1980s, Unix had fractured. Big corporations took the underlying technology and walled it off. You had IBM's AIX, Sun Microsystems' Solaris, HP UX. These were proprietary, incompatible, and incredibly expensive. A license could cost tens of thousands of dollars. If you were a student or a hobbyist wanting to learn how an OS worked, you were locked out. Enter Linus Torvalds, a 21-year-old computer science student at the University of Helsinki in 1991. He couldn't afford a Unix workstation. He was using a computer running MS-DOS, and he hated it. He wanted the power of Unix on his cheap PC hardware. So, he decided to write his own. On August 25th, 1991, he posted a message to a Usenet news group. It's now legendary. He wrote, "Hello, everybody out there. I'm doing a free operating system, just a hobby, won't be big and professional like GNU, for 386, 486 AT clones. Just a hobby, won't be big." Famous last words. What Linus actually built wasn't a whole operating system. He built the kernel. The kernel is the boss. It's the code that manages the hardware, the CPU, memory, and devices, and lets software talk to it. Linus built the engine. But an engine needs a car frame. Luckily, one already existed. Richard Stallman and the Free Software Foundation had been building an open-source Unix-like system called GNU for years. They had all the tools, compilers, and interfaces, the whole car frame, but they were missing a working engine. When Linus combined his kernel with the GNU tools, a complete free operating system was born. But the true stroke of genius wasn't just the code. It was the license. Linus released Linux under the GPL, the General Public License. This meant anyone could use it, modify it, and sell it. But if you improved the code, you had to share those improvements back with everyone else. It created a forced collaboration loop. While Microsoft and Apple had hundreds of paid engineers working in secret, Linux suddenly had thousands of volunteers working out in the open. The snowball had started rolling. The mid-90s. The internet is exploding from an academic curiosity into a global phenomenon. Suddenly, everyone needs a server. They need machines to host websites and serve files 24/7. If you were building a startup in 1996, you had two choices for your servers. You could buy expensive Unix RISC workstations, or you could use Microsoft's new Windows NT server. Windows NT was expensive. You paid per user license, and in the 90s, it was notorious for instability. You had to reboot it constantly. Or you could take an old, cheap PC, install Linux for free, and run it for months without ever rebooting. For cash-strapped startups trying to build the early web, there was no choice at all. This era gave birth to the LAMP stack, the magic combination that built the Web 1.0 and 2.0. Linux, the operating system, Apache, the web server software that serves the pages, MySQL, the database to store information, PHP, Perl, or Python, the scripting languages to make it dynamic. All four components were open source. All four were free. If you used Microsoft, you paid for the OS, paid for the IIS web server, paid for the SQL database. If you used LAMP, your software cost was zero. When the dot-com bubble burst in 2000 and funding dried up, the free option became the only option for survival. Companies like Google, Amazon, and Facebook weren't built on Windows. They were built on cheap hardware running Linux. The internet didn't just adopt Linux, it was built on top of it. By the turn of the millennium, Linux owned the startup web, but in the boardrooms of Fortune 500 companies and big banks, it was still viewed with suspicion. It was seen as hippie software, written by volunteers with nobody to sue if things went wrong. To become king, Linux needed to grow up. It needed a suit. That suit arrived courtesy of Big Blue. In 2001, IBM shocked the tech world by announcing they were investing $1 billion into Linux development and marketing. This was a massive gamble. IBM had its own Unix, AIX. Why would they fund a free competitor? Because IBM saw the writing on the wall. They realized they couldn't compete with the sheer speed of open source development. Instead of fighting the wave, they decided to ride it. IBM's endorsement told the corporate world, Linux is safe for business. But how do you make money on something that's free? Enter companies like Red Hat. Red Hat realized that big companies don't want free software. They want supported software. They want someone to call at 3 a.m. when the server crashes. Red Hat took the free Linux kernel, packaged it into a stable, reliable product for enterprises, and sold subscriptions for support and security updates. They proved you could build a billion-dollar company around free code. This model legitimized open source in the enterprise. Linux was no longer just for web servers. It moved into the core infrastructure of banks, stock exchanges, and governments. While Linux was conquering the server room, it was still losing the battle for the desktop. For 20 years, fans predicted the year of Linux desktop, and every year it failed to materialize. It was too fragmented, too technical for average users, and lacked key software like Photoshop or Microsoft Office. The tech world assumed that if Linux couldn't win the PC, it couldn't win the consumer. They were wrong. Linux didn't win the PC. It leapfrogged it. In 2007, Apple changed everything with the iPhone. And credit where it's due, iOS is derived from Unix, Linux's cousin. It proved a powerful Unix-like core could run a mobile device. Over at Google, they were panicking. They needed a mobile operating system to compete with Apple, and they needed it yesterday. They bought a small startup called Android. The Android team didn't have time to build an operating system kernel from scratch, so they grabbed the best, most flexible, battle-hardened kernel available, Linux. Every Android phone on Earth has the Linux kernel running deep inside it, managing memory, power, and hardware. Google put a slick, touch-friendly Java interface on top of it so you'd never know it was there. Android was the Trojan horse. It sneaked Linux into the pockets of 3 billion people. Today, Android has a roughly 70% global market share. That means, technically, Linux is the most widely used consumer operating system on the planet. By the turn of the 2010s, Linux had the servers. By 2012, it had mobile. But the final stage of conquest was everything else. Starting with the cloud. When you use Netflix or Dropbox or Zoom, your computer isn't doing the heavy lifting. A virtual machine in a data center is. Even Microsoft, the companies whose former CEO Steve Ballmer once called Linux a cancer, surrendered. Today, more than half of the virtual machines running on Microsoft's own Azure cloud are running Linux. Why? Because it's lighter, cheaper to run at scale, and it's what developers want. Then there's the Internet of Things. Because the Linux kernel is highly modular, you can strip it down to almost nothing to run on a tiny low-power chip or beef it up to run a supercomputer. It became the default choice for smart devices. Your router? Linux. Your smart TV? Probably Linux. The entertainment system in your car? Linux. And finally, the ultimate frontier. When NASA needed an operating system for the Ingenuity helicopter on Mars, something lightweight, reliable, and open source so they could fix bugs from millions of miles away, they didn't choose Windows. They chose Linux. The invisible king is now an interplanetary explorer. The story of Linux is a paradox. It lost the battle for the desktop, the only battlefield most people were watching, yet it won the war for computing. Linux proved that in the long run, open collaboration beats closed competition. Thousands of volunteers and computing corporations working on the same shared foundation created something more robust, flexible, and ubiquitous than any single company ever could. Linux isn't invisible because it's obscure. It's invisible because it's essential. Like electricity or indoor plumbing, we only notice it when it stops working. And the reason our digital world keeps working is because of that hobby project started by a Finnish student 30 years ago. Long live the king. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive, let me know in the comments. What's the weirdest device you know of that runs Linux? And don't forget to subscribe for more tech history.